Hey everybody, Dr. Joel Glenn Wixon here for another installment in our conversation about the present and the explicit. And first, before I start talking about that and catching you up on some things that have happened over the past couple of days, I want to talk to you about, just catch everybody up on where this all comes from, and in case somebody hasn't watched all the videos, the present and the explicit evolved in my own mind through a series of conversations with a bunch of different people, but began with the notion of the absent but implicit, which is an idea that I was caught up on by a teacher of mine named Michael White, various other people, but it really kind of originated with him. And it's based on this notion that contained within everything that we say are those purposes, those things that we stand up for, what matters to us, what we hold dear. And that through asking specific sorts of questions into the context of statements that people make, we can create sort of a second story development, evolving preferred ways of being that are implied in the things that we say, but not necessarily specifically spoken. And it occurred to me, geez, it starts to seem like perhaps this is a description of a way of speaking that certainly for me is not preferred. I'm not interested in having a way of speaking that is about implying. I'm way more interested in having a way of speaking that is about being explicit about what I'm trying to say, and not explicit in a way that's disrespectful or that's crude, but explicit in a way that creates a level of clarity. And so then my speaking becomes an evolution of clarity as opposed to a way of kind of being clearer about something that I'm already completely clear about, but just I'm not speaking directly to. And that can cover a variety of different subjects, but the ones that I'm most interested in are those things that we stand for and those things that we hold dear, our purposes. And to be free in my own life to speak about the things that matter to me, the things that I hold dear, and my purpose for doing whatever it is that I happen to be doing, particularly living, my purpose for living. So, having said that, let me catch you up on some of the things that have evolved in this past week. In talking about these ideas with a variety of different folks, I've gotten feedback from them or input from them that has to do with kind of their own conceptualization of these ideas that happened before I was even speaking to them. And one of these folks talked about the idea of for her, present and explicit was open and honest. And I was really struck by those words, especially the open word, because it reminded me about the notion of vulnerability in the context of speaking in ways that are present and explicit, and that really my experience is that in being more present and explicit in speaking about the things that matter to me, there's a level of vulnerability that's required. And so this is an idea that requires us to kind of reposition ourselves in relation to what we're willing to disclose to other people, and not disclosure in the context of personal, secret, private information, those kinds of ideas. That's not really what I'm talking about. It really is kind of heart center stuff. The idea that if I talk to you about what really matters to me, that makes me vulnerable in some ways, and it puts me in a position of being received in a variety of different ways, and some of those ways that might be hurtful. And I guess for my own intentions, I'm not interested in letting that get in the way of me speaking about those things that I hold dear. And again, this is not about me speaking aggressively. It's more about me speaking clearly and explicitly about the things that I stand for, regardless of how they might be received, and not allowing the possible reception of these ideas to limit my willingness to say what I'm going to say. And so it's as strange as it might seem, that seems like a pretty controversial thing to suggest, that in our speaking we speak in ways that make us vulnerable, that we speak in ways that we don't know what the receiver, how the receiver's going to respond. However, that's generally, I guess my bias would be that that's always the case anyway, that you can't possibly know how somebody's going to receive what you say, but that you don't allow that in and of itself to limit what you say. Now, I'm not talking about saying things that are intended to be hurtful, because really this isn't about my opinion about you. It's about me sharing with you those things that matter to me and what I hold dear. And so if somebody were to find me sharing that offensive, that's certainly a risk that I'm willing to take. I'm not interested in saying things that are intended to be hurtful about other people's positions, because that doesn't seem particularly useful for me in any way. If somebody's curious about my experience of their position, that's one thing, but for me to offer kind of my ideas about their position without being asked, and in a way that's pretty predictable to be difficult, I'm not sure that that's at least a bit useful, and it certainly isn't anything that I'm suggesting by the present and explicit. So I guess for this time, what I really want to focus on is that idea that this is a kind of explicit that's not about lewd, it's not about rude, it's not about destructive, it's not about dangerous. Well, maybe dangerous, but it certainly isn't about something that's intentionally hurtful, and it's probably not usually about anything that has to do with anybody but me, in the context of my kind of subjective experience of somebody else's behavior or attitudes or ideas. And that seems like that's pretty unusual, and at least in the context of my experience here in North America, the United States-ian section of North America, where we're really talking about what we hold dear, what matters to us, those fundamental ideas that kind of drive who we are. We don't do a lot of talking about that, and certainly not in ways that through narrative therapy we would talk about ways that would be considered richly described. And so this brings me to the kinds of questions that might support these kinds of conversations. So as I've said, these are ideas that come from narrative therapy that are predicated on the notion of the absent but explicit. But asking a question that's about, like for example, the question, you say, I really want things to be better. I say, what do you mean by better? And you might describe what you mean by better. And then I could say, so what does it say about what you stand for that you would want things to be better? And so what we've done right there is we've moved away from a construction of better, worse, into a question of position, a question of what it says about who this person is. And the answer to that question is this sort of the beginnings of what I'm considering present and explicit. So as you can see, an answer to that question about what it says about that person that they would want things to be better, there's not a lot of possibility that that's going to be something that's offensive, but it certainly invites someone into a position of talking about the sorts of things that we don't really talk about in this culture. One last thing before I end. It occurs to me as I'm speaking right now that it's going to be important in the context of present but explicit to slow down and to have more space in terms of the speed at which we unfold these ideas. We're moving so quickly in our culture that the idea of taking space and time to evolve ideas, it's not the sort of thing that's particularly honored. But I would absolutely want that to be a part of present and explicit. So presence requires time and reflection. Presence requires quietness. Presence requires the ability to flow through things in a way that's really, I guess it would be unique to the person who's sharing or who's being asked, and to take the time to really kind of craft what it is that you want to say. I was talking this past week to somebody about the old practice of letter writing that was about taking a pencil or a pen and writing something on a piece of paper, and the possibility that the person who's getting this isn't going to see it for a couple of days, maybe a week. Coming from a generation where that sort of thing happened fairly regularly, it changed how I did things. it changed how I thought through what I was going to say. That, if you can hear that alarm call, that chirp, that's there's a groundhog out there, and the bird's kind of upset about it. Um, but the art of writing a letter that's about taking time to think about what you're going to say and who's going to be receiving what you're going to say, and that you're crafting this document that's going to be delivered to somebody, fundamentally changed how I thought about that sort of a conversation. And in some ways, so that's part of what this process, I think, is going to evolve into for me. More time, more quiet, more thought, centeredness, and then considering how to express what it is that I'm going to be expressing. So anyway, that's it for this week. Thanks for taking the time to watch. I do hope you find these videos useful. Please be in touch with me. All my contact information is going to be at the end of the video. I'd love to hear what you have to say, what you think. I'm certainly having conversations with people about these videos all the time, because of the nature of my work and who's watching them, and the people who are close by, where we're conversing about them. But regardless of where you are, I'd love to hear what you have to say. And please do stay in touch.